Sweet, you guys can see just fine. So I originally prepared this for something completely different. I'm excited. I made some changes to it. Has anyone heard of DSPY before? You have. Cool. Well, so this doesn't stand for anything. Actually, I'll give my intro first. This is me. I did my undergrad in linguistics. I'm a staff machine learning engineer at JP Chase. And I wrote a book. That's the link for the book. Don't worry if you don't save it. You can like it's easy to find. But let's start right in this spot. What does it mean to train a model? And just like I want this to be interactive, so just give me your ideas.
Python goes burr.
Python goes burr. Yeah, dude. Well, most model training is in Python. What does that mean though to like actually make it? Because you can just have a little forward pass through it, something inheriting from nn.module, but like, is that a model? What do you think? Are there different types of training? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question to your query. So I heard on a podcast that, no, I don't have a question. I have a counterpoint to your training being necessary. So I heard on a podcast, somebody made the quip that the best rebrand in history was linear algebra rebranding itself as AI.
I love that.
So if linear algebra is AI, do we need training?
Ooh, great question.
So there's my quip. That's not the answer. If I were to honestly say it, even though anyway. So the real answer, I'm going to give that, and then do you want me to give my real answer? Or do you want to address AI?
Oh no,
your algebra?
It's going to be the same. It'll be exactly the same.
The same answer for both?
I do, yeah.
You can't do training by hand. You could do linear algebra by hand.
You can do training by hand. You should not do training. Because training is just your weights are a matrix, right? And you're just updating the numbers in the matrix. But what does that?
You're right.
Right?
Do it in Excel.
You can do it in Excel, and I will do it in Excel.
Hey, Chris is right.
So yeah, you have weights, biases, and activations that essentially allow you to represent your entire data in one matrix of weights or a set of matrices, right, for each layer. That essentially means that training is data compression, creating like everything from your data that you've been able to adequately represent with features between the actual inputs and the outputs ends up getting captured by the model. The admittedly adequately represent is doing real heavy lifting in that sentence, but that's what it is. Fine tuning, something to keep in mind. When you fine tune, you actually do change all of the weights in your model. And so you can't necessarily guarantee when you fine tune something that the model is still good at the things that were the reason why you picked it in the first place. Like if you love Llama 3 because it's really good at chat, but then you fine tune it on the Guanaco data set that's meant for instruct, it may lose its ability or some of its ability to do chat. That's not an amazing example because if you actually test that out, like it doesn't really lose it. It loses some knowledge of some things because you are changing the weights. And so the data isn't, all the data that it originally trained on is no longer completely represented in the new data. But this is something to consider. We fine tune to extend the abilities of model, and we kind of lose sight of the fact that it will lose some abilities whenever we do it.
So by the end, is that like the last few matrices that got loaded, or
It's the last few layers, yeah. Are you familiar with OhmFit? Has anyone ever heard of that? Do you know Jeremy Howard? He did Fast AI. He's an Australian dude, really awesome.
I know what fast AI is, but that's the extent of my knowledge.
So Jeremy Howard came up with this awesome thing called gradual unfreezing that happens to be like the basis of all model training now. Like if you load up Hugging Face and you just do load trainer and then trainer.train, it will do gradual unfreezing. where you freeze all of the layers of your model except for the final two, which are a linear layer and then some classifier, usually a softmax, right? And then you go through a little while of the model only training those last two final layers, because those are the ones that you want to train the most. You don't want to train how it changes or how it detects input, like how it initially processes words as input, as much as you want to change how it is classifying whatever comes out of it, the embeddings. Does that make sense? So that's why I put that there. Meaning, like, the way that you enter data is not going to change as much as what data comes out. But yeah, it is sequential in a model. But so yeah, it teaches the whole model. It's usually really costly just because fine tuning, if you're not doing like some sort of a quantized version of fine tuning, ends up being about the same precision as how the model was originally trained. And that's hard to deal with. It's usually really huge. And so people have come up with low rank adaptation, which is on the complete other side of things, where you use a matrix multiplication trick, broadcast all of your weights down into a much smaller dimension. And then you have a subsequent matrix that you can multiply that smaller dimension back into the right dimension. So you're able to adapt particular layers of your model that you've deemed really important. There's a similar, go ahead.
Which for the linear algebra people, it's singular value decomposition or
Exactly, yeah.
that nature.
Exactly.
Or this.
Or decomposing the, let's say, 768 dimension matrix into like a rank 16 matrix, which is usually the most common one, and then you're broadcasting it back into the normal dimensions. And you can actually do this to just, you can create a LoRa that literally outputs the exact same as your regular model. That's not super useful though. The reason we like LoRa's though is they are teeny. Like the biggest one that I've ever seen was 116 megabytes on disk. And that was for a 70 billion parameter model. And yeah, it's much more manageable, and it allows you to swap in LoRa's kind of as needed to do different tasks with the same base model, which is very cool. But both of these contain the same problem in that you are still changing the model. Enter the, oh, actually, here we go. Are you guys familiar with sycophantism?
No.
It's a trait that happens in RLHF tuned models where they go more off of human input than off of any logical data, because that's what they were taught to value more. This is another side effect of training and the way that we choose to train things. I'm mostly getting at this just to help introduce the problem that we're trying to solve with DSPY, where DSPY, this annoys me so much. It used to stand for stuff back when they came up with DSP at Stanford. And it's technically the same thing, but it's being applied to something completely different. So the DSP doesn't mean it, like it doesn't match anymore. So it's just this, it's not an acronym for something.
It's the spirit of what it stood for.
It's the spirit of it, exactly. You're using the same recursive stochastic gradient descent way of doing things, but in a completely new problem. And I'm gonna get into that in a second. The idea here though, is you have a middle of the road cost because it takes probably just as long as fine tuning.
Your computer didn't jump off the Wi-Fi. So the building's Wi-Fi has been having some major issues.
I'm still connected.
Okay, can you just reshare then?
It tells you that, but it lies.
Also true.
It does tell me that, and it did lie.
Also, can everybody see the screen? I can dim the lights and make it a little bit easier to see.
I can see it great.
Okay. Some people complain when it's code, but we're good.
Yeah, I tried not to put too much code in this. So let's establish something that you've probably heard of before. LLMs are terrible at math. Like, they're so bad. This is grade school math. These are literally problems that you solved in second grade where they're talking about John going to the store and buying 28 apples. You know, those are these problems. But the deal though is that you have to keep track of the variables throughout the problems, and then you have to figure out what to do with those variables at the end in order to get the right answer. So it's not just math, which LLMs are already bad at, it's multi-hop math, which LLMs are terrible at, because they're bad at both math and multi-hop. GPT-4 gets 3%, which if you do some quick math, that's like 150 out of 8,000. Pretty bad. Others get more, but none of them are really high, like right off the bat. Here's some reasons for it. This is the llama tokenization strategy. And this is a comparison between GOAT, which is a llama 2 trained model, versus GPT-4, which has 1.7 trillion parameters, which the fact that it's getting these questions wrong with the math, it's not because it can't do it, it's just because it can't see it adequately. But you can teach it to figure out how to see it adequately, because it's part of this is because it's using a BPE tokenizer, which handles unknown inputs in a particular way, meaning that if you have a combination of numbers, let's say like a group of 3 numbers within that big old string of numbers that the model has never seen in that order before, it's going to handle that and group all 3 of those numbers together. And it will just look like one character or one token to the model, and it doesn't know what to do with it necessarily. It can be taught though. And that's one of the things that DSPY does really well. So to explain really what it's doing, DSPY will input whatever you want into your model. It'll input training examples, it'll input valuation examples into your model, and it will monitor what happens as it goes through the model. And with APIs, it's harder for it to do it, but it still works. Like you can do this with the OpenAI or Anthropic APIs. The deal though is just it monitors the parameters of the model, and it will create scenarios with those hyperparameters. Like let's take a seed where you can input a random seed to the OpenAI API to get a particular generation every time. Right? It will do seed incrementation. It will sometimes go for a random seed to just find what is the best scenario and what is the best optimal prompt that has been augmented by your model itself to get the right answer. And it's weird. I've heard people say that DSPY and guidance from Microsoft are killing prompt engineers, but I think it's actually creating prompt engineers, because this is actual engineering of prompts as opposed to just coming up with a clever string. What's up?
Can you kill a career that hasn't even taken off yet?
Yeah, right. I don't even, I have no idea. I don't think so. That's why it bothers me that I've heard that said. I think this is the evolution of prompt engineering into an actual field where you are programmatically using stochastic gradient descent to determine what the best prompt is. That prompt is not always human readable. It's not always human interactable.
That's what I wanted to do in my bot anyway. I
Right?
came up with it on my own. So smart.
Nice. So here's some code. This is super, super simple. And I wrote this actually before they had approved the pull requests for HF model. So now you can just import HF model from DSPY, and you don't even have to convert all of your keyword arguments to like from OpenAI to Hugging Face. And I'm working right now on a pull request to do that for Llama CPP. If you like it super local, if you're okay with something a little bit more API focused, you can use Ollama, and they have a class for that. But this is the important part. You just have to make sure that you have a universal tokenizer so that all of your inputs and everything in between the models or in between the model chains actually gets tokenized in the same way. And then you just compile, they call it a signature, but it's really similar to PyTorch code. It looks like a neural network module. It looks really similar to it. You just compile it and it will essentially train. It's doing stochastic gradient descent, but it's training for a prompt instead of training for a model. And right here, we have, if you're unfamiliar with this, I'm using 30 examples from the train set. I don't know how you could be familiar with this because I wrote this and I didn't specify any of it. I'm only training on 30 examples, and the dev set is 250 examples to evaluate against, just to make sure that the goal is to take good examples from the train set that it gets right, and then take a full stack trace of that train set and insert it into the prompt as a few shot marker to show the model exactly what it needs to do in order to get exactly the right answer. Those are some insulting jokes. Here's the end of it. This is with Llama 3, just vanilla after 30 training examples with DSPY. And from those training examples, it bootstrapped 2 of them. So it has 2 traces in its few shot, but it ended up getting 149 out of 200, which is statistically incredibly significant, going from 14.5%. And it ended up getting a similar amount. I think it was 72% on the full 8K when I evaluated it, which is great. It's just showing that it actually does work to essentially coax information out of models in specific formats. Because part of the reason that those models got a lot of those questions wrong is it's looking for just the answer. Sometimes the answer was contained within the model output, but it had like, sure, I'm really happy to help with that. The answer is 149. And that's not an exact match. You can figure out how to parse that, and you can create your own metrics super easily if you know how to parse LLM output in order to skip some of that weirdness. But this has allowed me to output only the number answer, and that's it, which is pretty cool. So how does it help with agents? Basically, there are 2 different ways of doing it. You can use React, which is reason then act. DSPY has a whole module for it. You can bootstrap, and you can just use that. Or what I think is the better version, because you're keeping some of the control out of the model's hands of that whole process, is you do regular chain of thought, and you just go from a question to an augmented version of the question, similar to advanced retrieval, where you can generate several versions of a query to make sure that you're hitting the exact right document you're trying to retrieve. And then you go from that augmented query and your question into should you use the tool, and if so, which tool to use from a set list. And there are different ways of doing it. I'm going to go over what Bootstrap Few Shot with random search versus Bootstrap Few Shot is just on the next slide. But basically, this allows you to lock down the chain, so to speak, so that the model goes from this to this. And if you're not sure what this is in Python, this is just, it's kind of similar to Bash. It's just piping it right into the next thing. That's it. Do we have questions about this before I explain the next thing and end? Or questions so far about how this works, why it works? Any of that?
I'll have a question after your next slide, probably.
Go ahead, Saul.
I guess I'm wondering why you think, or why you felt that train of thought is better than React.
Oh, I love that question, actually. That's perfect. I want it to break this up into steps. React can, but it's volatile. It will sometimes break it up into steps, and sometimes it won't. I have some examples that I decided not to show in here, and maybe I'm thinking that I should have. If you use like LangChain's zero-shot React tool, and you input like, hi, how are you? All of us, like, it will always use a tool. It's like, I must search the internet to find out, hi, how are you? And it's going to come back with like the most random thing afterwards. And that's kind of a charged example because I'm like using the agent wrong, but this actually catches that. If I say, hi, how are you? And I go from a question to an augmented question, and then go from augmentation to should I use a tool for this? You can pipe this back into chain of thought at the end of it and get good chat and good agentic behavior at the same time. It generalizes it a teensy bit. And you can't use bigger frameworks for it right now, but I'm sure that they're going to build this type of stuff into them. This is basically the guidebook for how you should use this if you are going to use it. the top of the data requirements, if you only have like 5 to 10 examples for a train set, or train and dev set, do 3 examples of a train set and 7 for your dev set, you can bootstrap FewShot with that. And it's not always going to get everything right, but like I said, I only needed 30 examples from that 8K data set to boost it from 14.5 up to 74.5% accuracy. And you don't need a ton of data to come up with a better prompt. Right? Bootstrap FewShot with random search ends up doing what I was describing earlier, where it's not just grabbing FewShot examples for your prompt, it's also looking at hyperparameters to tune the scenario around the model as well, such as seed. If you have a local model, it will actually look at your gradients, which is why it takes a while to do it, because you can't do with torch.nograd for nice inference speed while you're training, which, yeah, doesn't make a ton of sense. But then if you have a lot of data, they have whole programs for optimizing the whole thing, which is super cool. It's like beyond FewShot. It does kind of FewShot plus LoRa, vPro and CoPro do. It's cool. You can train this just on a MacBook. I'm doing it right now for work. I've like omitted a ton of examples, so I'm not showing you like the stuff that I'm doing currently, but it's super slow. It takes like 7 hours to run one training session on like not a ton of data. You probably should use either CUDA or ROCm. ROCm, you're going to need to finagle a bit more to make sure that it works. Yeah. That's it. This is me. That's the link to my book. Feel free to connect. And yeah, I'm super open for questions at this point if you have any.
How usable is it in like production? It sounds like it's very useful for like local models where you
Oh, it's incredibly usable. Their default, like part of the reason that this is hard for me to recommend for everything is because they like the package that you import still has GPT-4 hard coded in several portions, and you just kind of have to figure out where those are to like modify the class. And that's annoying. I don't like doing that. If you're going to put this into production, you're going to have to get that familiar with it in order for it to happen. I want to introduce this though, because this is really compelling, cool research that you will see mature, and people will end up figuring out how to put it into production. Like I said, I have a pull request open right now for Llama CPP with them. Yeah, not right now, later. What's up?
So I was wondering, the one area of research I'm really interested in is this prompt optimization strategy. So there's all these problems that we have. For example, like you have a like a 3-page document that you're trying to classify into a JSON object with 30 attributes that are true or false, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, you have the document, you have the prompt, the 30 categories. What prompt is going to maximize that accuracy? And it seems very nebulous right now what best practices are.
Yeah.
So if you like, what are your recommendations for, that's one example of many, but it's like this entire idea of like engineering prompting.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in like where that's going, and I like, where do I go for more information, Chris?
I want to plug my own book here.
Yeah. I'm giving you an opportunity to plug your book for one.
I would recommend a little bit of like, I know engineers hate this because it's a humanities, but it's like a hard humanity. A little bit of linguistics research where like at least so far as you understand that the way that humans process and expand on information in our minds is not optimal. Right? So mimicking humans is not going to be incredibly effective for getting deterministic results out of non-deterministic functions.
Yes.
Right? That's crazy.
That is the problem.
Yeah, 100%. So I recommend DSPY is awesome, but it's still in a research stage. I recommend Guidance from Microsoft.
Okay.
They have a whole very mature package that they do have in production, where they like you can constrain the outputs to only this JSON with these keys, and the model has to just fill in the values. or you have a list of possible responses, yes, no, unknown. You have to pick one of these, and the model can reason with itself over which one to do, but it helps constrain it down to something that is a bit more deterministic that you can use. This is going in that direction, but fundamentally you still want it to be a little bit creative. You know what I mean?
They're just different styles of, if we tweak, like, let's just say the formatting is taken care of, okay?
Yeah.
But it's like, how do I increase the accuracy of this random classification problem that we have with text?
Yeah.
And it's just, it just seems like there's a lot of noise out there, and I would love to know.
One of the things that I've been working through is how to create really good metrics for measuring that accuracy. And in making those metrics, this sounds so dumb when I say it. In order to make the metric, I have to figure out how to parse the LLM output, which means I have to figure out what is going to be predictable in that output to be able to like just do a freaking string R index on a colon or a regex or something, you know? That has helped me a lot for the problems that I'm currently working on to like actually reason them out, is creating my own metrics for not necessarily accuracy. Sometimes it's like a threshold of, did you get at least 50% of it? You know, did you get all the keys correct in this dictionary? Awesome. We're going to move on with that, you know, that kind of a thing. If you get stuck there, I think some of the main things are telling the model that like, hey, I need you to reason with whatever you're going to do, but end with answer : whatever. So I can get rid of all of your rationale and only get that one thing. It's hard though. It's unsolved because like, how do you solve that with like a CTO? How do you get only the relevant information that you're looking for from that conversation? And that's unsolved too, you know?
So at the beginning, you mentioned that sometimes these prompts weren't going to be human understandable. What types of things have you seen? Also, like, do you feel in this case, the end accuracy justifies the means of us not being able to explain even less what's going on?
Even less. Oh, I love that actually. Yeah, it does turn it into more of a black box than LLM engineers are used to, I guess. I think that being able to control the output is worth the means of controlling that output. That's just me though, because I don't know. I've talked with business leaders a lot about models, and the main thing that it's really hard for them to understand is that like, even with the exact same seed and the exact same prompt, you might get something different every time that you put it through. And like, it just doesn't click for a lot of people that like, why is it nonlinear? Well, because language has no logical underpinning. It's all nonlinear anyway, and that's what the input is. So yeah, we need a nonlinear solution to take care of it. This attempts to essentially lock it down, make sure that you can have deterministic results for POCs, for tests, to make sure that like we can justify building a product, and then you can deal with like the human readable prompts after.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. You in the back?
Quick question. You mentioned you can kind of like anchor a good response, like, oh, hey, it had two really good examples in your math thing that it used for reference.
Yeah.
So does it do that by itself? Do you kind of have to have any human in the loop stuff, or does it just?
You have to have a data set already of like inputs and expected outputs. So that's where I think the actual anchoring comes in, which is similar to all machine learning, right? Even unsupervised machine learning, you are giving it a correct output that was human determined beforehand, right? It's that's what the anchoring is. This is just further coaxing the model to mimic that behavior. Does that make sense?
You pass it as like a reference, like, hey, this was a good answer as part of your prompt, kind of.
You give it a full stack trace, and you make sure that it has the same seed as when it gave that good answer, and you make sure that it, like, you kind of enforce at every layer that the matrix multiplication has stayed the same as when it gave that good answer in order to get the right answer out of the end of it. Like, for example, in like a project that I've done myself, I got it to output a 500 token dictionary pretty consistently with the same keys all throughout the dictionary. and different values depending on a document that we had ingested, which dealing with PDFs is already bad enough. Like, why do we have to read them now? I'd rather not. Does that make sense? Where it's locking down, this is what I want. It will still get the values wrong sometimes, but everything that it's getting right is so crucial. Go ahead, Brian. Oh, I'm sorry.
So just a question on that. Does that somewhat constrain the temperature of the model or the creativity in any ways?
You get to set the temperature at the beginning. That's one of the queries that it accepts. So you can still tell it to be creative. I have found, oh, this is actually a wonderful piece. If you do this, keep your temperature above 0.15. You will get errors if you go below that. I don't know why, but like just a piece of advice. I keep my temperature at around 0.16 when I want very specific stuff like that dictionary example. I need it to be the same every time. Or other stuff like freaking Recursion is doing DSPY for biomedical research. Like they have temperatures up at 0.6 to like 0.85 to make sure that, oh man, it actually is still creative. It's just the same format. Any more? Go ahead.
Also, this is sort of piggybacking off the more black box at the same time, talking about like parsing input to separate out hi there from numbers and words like give me a sum or a product or how many would I need, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And maybe I just need a better imagination of who's using this and how. Because if I compare it to like Google, I need to sometimes I need Boolean operators say, no, I want this word is the name of something and it needs to appear somewhere. Like it can't be a guess of something similar to that where I need that word because I know it's great. I mean, I imagine sometimes if I'm putting in a word problem, say I get no this right, this is important, this object here.
Yeah.
And whereas over here, okay, actually these bits were less relevant. And this, this is or something like that. Like in order, because maybe it makes a guess as to the relationship between the numbers and the words, but it guessed wrong.
Yeah.
And and as long as I can tell that the output was, beyond what's reasonable, I can say, okay, well, no, make sure if I can't see like where it's going wrong, then it's hard for me to say, and I think I'd like to be able to say, place more emphasis on this phrase, place more emphasis on this.
So part of the reason that I have it like this looks like pseudocode, but it's actually what they use because they end up synthesizing prompts out of this construction. As part of that, like this is just calling literally that function. But if you create a module similar to PyTorch code, which is what I recommend you do, they call them signatures. You actually can have like an input field and you can tell it, hey, this input field is the question and you need to look specifically for people's names in this field. And you can also do the same thing for output fields at every single point that you are outputting stuff. I've used it to say, hey, please don't add any extra spaces in between the numbers. Like I need those numbers to be all together, or don't add commas, or replace any hyphens with underscores. Like you can do that with this. Obviously, like the training takes longer to process, but then inference time ends up being the exact same time as your LLM was going to run anyway. Only you're getting better stuff if you're able to. Obviously, like the big caveat is you have to be able to represent it with the data. Like you can't give it non sequitur data and then expect good results out of it. And then you have to figure out still a little bit what to put in those input field descriptions and output field descriptions to make sure that it's not confusing the model or giving it like conflicting instructions at different points. I debugged one recently that it was a big old class that had it had a description for every single input field. But most of the output fields all said I need relevant JSON or like machine readable JSON. And then one output field said I need a dictionary. And for some reason, telling the model both JSON and dictionary in separate output fields really screwed with it. And it was not outputting readable JSON. You could not just do JSON.loads on the output the way that you should be able to. yeah, you gotta keep track a little bit and be consistent with it, but if you're able to meet it at that point, then it usually works in my experience, which is why I'm telling you guys about it. Does that make sense?
I think so. I mean, I don't know a whole lot, so.
Most of their examples too, if you go to the DSPY GitHub and you go in their examples folder, most of their examples use retrieval, where you can have not just a question, but you can also have context as another input field where you're able to specify like, hey, I really need this name, or I need this file number, or I need something out of this retrieved document. Or just, you can even go so far as like, I need numbers that look like this number, and just have it be the same number of digits, you know? Go ahead.
Does it do the opposite as well? Can this be used to anonymize data?
It can. It can. I don't know anyone who's doing that. But like, it has been proposed within where I'm working for that. And we're also using like advanced retrieval for some other security stuff, which is kind of cool that it was not built for. But yes, you can do that. You can tell it to change names. You can tell it to delete PII. And if you just are specific about what PII means and what it looks like, you can do that. Anyway, go ahead one more time.
Yeah, so with the actual accuracy of the model, the other models, the generalist models, didn't perform super well. And it seems like a large part of that was how it was outputting for exact matches. If we normalize that, like it doesn't seem like a huge data set. I'm guessing there's like accuracy metrics where it's been like parsed through. Does it see like a significant improvement in other areas just based on like the reasoning that it has to go through to get through this point as well?
You're asking a deeper question than I think you're meaning to. The real magic of LLMs is parsing output into relevant types and, you know, fields. That's it, right? Like the reason why some of these companies are so far ahead of the game is because they have a model that probably behaves close to on par as like its open source equivalent, but they have this whole system that a machine learning engineering team has built around that model to not only change the input to be ideal for the model before it goes in, but then change the output of the model after it comes out, not using other models, right? This is like NLP engineering from back in the day. Just to parse both the input and the output to make it more relevant, to figure out what type of output the person may have intended for, or what relevant information maybe should it contain because you did named entity recognition on the input, you know, that kind of stuff. The answer is yes. Part of the reason that I mentioned the tokenization in here is if you use a lot of those generalist models, you have to factor in the fact that it doesn't know good tokenization for things like numbers in order to figure out which model to actually change to ask it questions, right? Is this data set or is this task going to be good for GPT-4? For example, pulling file numbers off of PDFs, right? GPT-4 is going to suck at that because it will often change the numbers or switch their order, or, you know, like it just doesn't know how to deal with them because tokenization is bad. You can use Go7b with it though. You can use pretty much any model because they allow HF model, they allow Llama CPP soon, and they allow Llama. So yeah, it does go up if you parse it correctly. Anyway, cool. Thanks everyone.
Yeah, we'll see if this works.
I'm trying to grab more food.
Yeah, and I'll plug Chris's book as well. It's really good. Read it?
You know, I'd probably ask him fewer questions if I read it.
That's probably true.
Do it on my Mac. I don't mind.
Phone's good work. Hallelujah. Well, my talk's going to be a lot less technical than Chris's, but hope it's just as applicable to you guys. Since
I don't know that.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a way for me to change it. And that doesn't change it.
It's like using your screen as a camera instead of as a screen.
I think my screen didn't work. Maybe I'll jump on yours.
Ah,
I sent it to you.
okay. Let me pull that up.
Here, maybe it'll change if I actually join the meeting first,
Oh, instead of do presentation mode.
instead of doing it from the slides. Yeah. Beat me to it, so never mind.
Yes, I win. Don't want this. Stop it. Oh, now it has your thing up again. It kicked me off of my screen share.
I'll pick up. I guess as an introduction, I'm Tanner Davis. I don't have an intro like Chris did on his, but I work in machine learning related stuff as well. I worked at Lumea, which is a company here in Utah, doing image segmentation models on prostate biopsies, stuff of that nature. That was really fun. And then had a stint with a logistics company in LA doing more traditional machine learning type models and their machine learning infrastructure per se down there. So that kind of triggers why I'm talking about this, because I've been in the job market since February. So it's just something that's on my mind. I just wanted to share that I know that every employee's favorite pastime is job searching, job hunting. Minor inconveniences at work. So it's like by raise of hands, how many of you are in the job market currently? Yeah, so about half of us. Yeah. So hopefully I can share some insights with you guys. I just barely got an offer from a company after 4 months. So this is my like retrospective. Through a staffing agency, so I'll thank them. But it's like a retrospective for myself of like, all right, what's going on in the job market. And I just want to like start off by saying that there are jobs, even though it feels like it, there aren't sometimes, right? I mean, take any graph that I'm going to show you in here with a grain of salt, because they're from companies and those companies have narratives that they want to display with their graphs, right? This is from TrueUp, which is like a job board that I found out about like this week. It seems really cool, but essentially they've been tracking that ever since 2022, which is, as we know, when everybody and their dog got multiple offers for whatever job on planet Earth that you wanted. And essentially we've come back, I think we're starting to stabilize, but there are jobs, even though it doesn't feel like it. So like, why is it so difficult then at the moment? And I mean, the dumb answer and the easy answer is there's also lots of people, right? After layoffs, this is from layoffs.FYI, which started tracking layoffs. I want to say before 2020, but my guess is they started around then. So like, I mean, just Q1 alone, right there, spitting out almost 170,000 workers. Kind of coincides with that huge decrease that we see in the available jobs over here. So yeah, you're dealing with among other things besides lots of people, I think another big one is decision makers. I don't want to like group the people together, but like C-suite decision makers that have been convinced that you don't need to be replaced because now we have an LLM that can do your job, right? We laid you off because now we're more efficient and blah, 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 right? And so that's kind of an issue that you're dealing with, trying to overcome is convincing them that that's not the truth. And as Chris mentioned, sometimes it's a little hard where you're like, look, this LLM doesn't produce deterministic output. And how much is that worth to your company and whatnot, right? All right, let me pull up my notes since I had some stuff written down here that I wanted to go over. So yeah, in this case, it's just a mixture of these layoffs. I think also an increase in just the tech workforce in general from graduating students, right? I got BYU's newsletter for the College of Mathematical and Physical Sciences, and computer science was by far the biggest major, like 5 times bigger than any other major that was at BYU. And I'm sure that's the same at pretty much any university. And so that's what's coming into the workforce every semester as students are graduating, right? So potential for bumpy roads ahead with that. But as I mentioned, hopefully things are normalizing. This is from LinkedIn. I went to them because, I mean, they're like basically the biggest job board. So I figure, and they have lots of information on that are hiring. Essentially, this is trying to normalize within the United States, seasonally adjusted, sorry, what the hiring rate is for all companies in the US. And their hiring rate, what they said, was based on if you as a person changed your job within a certain amount of time, within the month that you started that job. All right, so that's what they're basing it on. So that can have some impact on the numbers that show up here. But essentially, just what I want to point out here is obviously we're coming back from this 2022 high down to this normalization. Even though hiring's down year over year, it is up within the last couple of months. And so hopefully things start turning around within the job market. In that sense. So eventually, I wanted to also share just kind of like my personal statistics on what happened with myself, perhaps what you guys can expect, and I hope it goes better for you guys than it went for me. As you can see, I still have a bunch of jobs on like my to apply list. I don't know how many of them are still active since some of them are like 3 months old. But essentially like 22%, 20% of all my applications turned into actual interviews. 35% of them turned into rejections, which I classified a rejection as talking with anyone that wasn't like a hiring position and then them not wanting to deal with me anymore. And then no answer is obviously just either I got caught by the bot and nobody saw my resume, or they saw my resume and decided not to talk to me. What was that?
They just ghosted you.
They just ghosted me. And I specifically added some companies on there after I went through the entire process with them, final interview and everything. They literally just didn't talk to me. There's those 3 up there. No matter how many times, no matter how many times I messaged their hiring manager, anybody, nothing. So I was just like, I guess I dodged a bullet with those ones, which was nice. So yeah. And then I just wanted to kind of mention as well, just from a mental, emotional health state of mind as well. Like, I get it, layoffs suck, right? There's nothing worse than the feeling of a layoff and then just feeling like you're doggy paddling in the ocean, right? It's an emotional roller coaster for sure. And hopefully, some of those tips that I can give you guys at the end will help you navigate that. I also, this is kind of part of the tips as well, once again, and this is basic, you're gonna hear it everywhere. Referrals are your lifeline. Referrals from, whether it's from recruiters or internal, external friends within your network. I didn't have like an amazing conversion rate with my referrals. It was like 50-50. But that was way better than my Hail Marys, which is just I'm applying on their website or whatever, right? Just tossing in my hat in the ring. So more or less that was the breakdown with between referrals and rejections and whatnot. So some tips that I'll give you guys while you still have your job is that turned out a lot smaller than I expected. Updating your resume regularly. So whenever you have like your team wins or whatever, you release a product, big project, write that down. It doesn't have to be in your resume, but just write it down somewhere in a way that like this impacted the company this way. So then when it's time to update your resume, you can just like copy paste, put that into your resume for whatever job it is that you're interested in. Make sure you invest in yourself because most of the time the company won't, right? So networking, come to these meetups. We appreciate you guys being here and hope it's more than something to help you find a job again. We hope you stick around. Personal projects, obviously that's, I think that got pushed under the rug a lot when 2022 was around and you could just find a job willy-nilly or whatever, right? And now it's more so you have to like differentiate yourself, and they also help a lot with just visibility on how you do work. Like I couldn't take a single thing from my previous job and like show people that I did this, right? Because that's proprietary company information that I can't just like share in an interview with them. So do personal projects, get some books, buy Chris's book. It's a good one. Self-teach yourself. There's lots and lots of experts out there now. So it's very good. And I think the main experts will be the ones that are producing quality content, right? In the form of books, larger blogs and whatnot to some extent, right? So keep an eye on them. Take a break, right? Like enjoy taking a break, maybe do some consulting work on the side if you've got time in your life for that. And then make an emergency fund if you don't have one. That's a financial thing that you should do no matter what, but more so in preparation for the worst in this potential job market. And then some suggestions for the job hunt that I tried for myself. The biggest one was once again taking a break, decompressing if you can afford it. Obviously, I know not everybody can, but just like take a weekend, take a week or two off, and just decompress. It took me a while to like come to terms that I had no control over this layoff or whatever, right? I was like beating myself up for like 2 weeks about it, and then just came to the terms that like the entire department got laid off. It's not like I could have changed anything that was gonna like change the C-suite's mind on that, right? Preparing for interviews, obviously optimize your resume for those lovely automated systems that we like. There's tools out there. I know Todd, you used one and probably hated it. So they like try and optimize your resume so that it'll pass the system, right? Which is usually just OCR and then them looking for a bunch of keywords that are in the job description more than likely. As much as I hate saying it, leak code just for the sake of getting back into like the algorithm and data structure state of mind and mindset, thinking about optimizing stuff. Because even though I hate them so much, technical interviews are a thing and they're probably not going anywhere anytime soon. And then practicing your systems designs with like a friend or colleague. Use your network, obviously. Only apply to companies that you're really, really interested in. Like for myself, it was hard to not just like throw my resume out there like crazy, just to try and find a job, because I had a pregnant wife that the baby was going to be due in like 2 months. And so I was like beating myself up over that, really, really stressed. And then I get farther along in these companies and like, I just wasted my time because I'm not really that interested in this company. So I'd say really make like a concerted effort to apply for the companies that you're really interested in. And sometimes you just gotta have the gall to like let them know that you don't have time for their stupid take-home assignments. Like I had at least a couple of companies come back to me and say that they would just move me on to the next step. So it's just like, I don't have time to do this like a couple hours for every single company that wants me to do this. Like, you want me or not? Like, just moving on to your interview rounds and we can talk with people and go from there. Take rejections as a chance to learn and iterate, even though they suck. Asking the company for feedback and keeping those good relationships with like the recruiters or whoever from those companies will pay off in the long run for you. And remember that all it takes is one company saying yes, right? Out of the 65 companies that I applied to, eventually it only took just one giving me the yes. So keep it up. You guys will do great. And this is something I just want to plug in for anybody that eventually gets into the position where you're doing the hiring is if there's like something you just vehemently hate about the hiring process, try and be the change at your company to do that, right? So if I ever get into the position of hiring processes, I will make sure that technical interviews are not a thing. I'll find another path besides just stupid algorithm tests to see if somebody knows what they're talking about and can do it, right? And then I just wanted to share some job boards that I found useful that you guys can check out. You probably know most of them. Obviously, LinkedIn. Massive is one of those kind of AI type, like it'll auto apply to stuff for you. I tried it out for like a week or two and applied to like 4 jobs for me.
It'll auto format for ATS also.
Yes, yeah, it'll do your resume similar.
Get any interviews from UMass?
I might have gotten like 1. But I didn't try it for very long, as I mentioned, and it like just seemed like it stopped working for me. I don't know if the companies are catching on to how they're doing stuff, right? Like web scraping or however it is they're doing stuff. So, but they're a really good job board. I used them for a job board after that because they seem to scrape things really well. They're similar to TrueUp in the jobs that they scrape, where it's mostly like bigger startups and the big tech corporations. Y Combinator, obviously, if you really, really want to get in the startup scene. And then Levels, FYI, which when they started was just for like comparison and making sure that you're getting compensated fairly, but they've started to have a job board that I've seen. So, yeah, good luck out there, guys. There are jobs. It takes one company, you guys can do it. So that's all I wanted to share with you. It's kind of state of the job market as it feels at the moment. So.
Quick plug. Thank you. That was awesome. So really appreciate it. I too just was like last 6 months was unemployed, and 2 things that really helped me that I'd add to your like suggestions thing. One, I didn't realize you could qualify for unemployment. So for the first month or so, I didn't know about it, and a friend told me about it. And you get like $700. It's dependent on your salary, but it caps out at $700 or $712. So you get
unemployment as soon as you need it.
Yeah, and so that really helped us, obviously. And then 2, talking about LLMs and things like that with the previous one, I would just copy the job description into chat and ask it to give me a mock interview. And so if a friend or family member can't do that with you, you can interact that way. So I would like kind of record myself and just answer right away as if I were in an interview. and that really helped prepare me. And it was pretty cool questions that I maybe wouldn't have thought of and things like that from.
And it's going to help prepare you a lot because I had at least one interview where somebody told me that they just were like, I just plugged in a bunch of questions into ChatGPT for you because I don't know a thing about Python. And I was like, oh, good. That's what we So
like to hear.
You instead of.
that wasn't a technical interview, but it was like just like a talking interview where they're like,
That wasn't the one that offered you the job, was it?
no, they're
I
like,
was
does
gonna
not
waste my time.
it was just kind of like, yeah, all right.
I want to strongly reiterate the unemployment thing, because a lot of people think that like, oh, government assistance, I don't want to like, no, that doesn't come out of anybody's taxes. That doesn't come out of anybody's like, anything other than unemployment insurance that your company is already paying. Everybody that employs anybody has to pay unemployment insurance. And people that lay people off have to pay higher insurance if they get claims. So make them pay for their decisions and file for unemployment.
It's a direct way to get back to the
Yeah,
company.
that is, it is a direct way to get back at the company in some fashion,
In a
right?
very real, very direct, fair way.
So yeah, get unemployment as soon as possible.
It's actually one of the chief motivations for severance.
So it doesn't come out of anything government related, as you mentioned. It's all your company's employment insurance that they're already paying for. So. Any other comments that you guys have? Feel free to toss them out.
I have one other suggestion. One thing that really helped me was having samples of, previous experience. Like, I am in dashboarding, like, business intelligence. So, I kind of created like Tableau dashboards, Power BI dashboards, and put it in my portfolio. That helped me. One recruiter like actually rejected me for the first time he interviewed, and then he came back after looking at my portfolio, and it is still continuing. Still in the process.
Yeah,
Augment your portfolio with current work.
Yeah.
that's where personal projects will play a big part. If you're lucky enough to have a company that does like open source stuff or stuff of that nature.
Somebody posted it for something about NDAs recently. Do you remember? So like they're not enforceable anymore or something?
Non-competes.
Non-competes. I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
non-competes.
Go directly to your company's competitors.
I should say, here is the code that I wrote.
Refresh in my mind. Hire me as soon as you can, because it's only gonna last so long over here.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'll get off the soapbox since I'm done.
Okay, well, I'm not gonna give my time. It's 8:00.
All right.
So if you don't have any more questions for Tanner, just wrap things up. Thanks for coming, everybody.